Namaskar, good morning. What I'm going to share may sound like my story, but it truly isn't. It's the journey of a teacher. It's a story of transformation and belief. The journey of a teacher and what the journey taught her. The journey that shows how deeply our beliefs shape the future of children, of the privileges and the possibilities that we create for them. I never wanted to be a teacher. In fact, I was very certain that teaching was predictable, it was repetitive, and even boring. The textbooks or the content that I studied would land up on my son's table as well. But life has a strange sense of humor, and I became a teacher, not by choice, but definitely by chance and by accident. And what began as an accident slowly became the journey of my life. In my early years, I explored experiential learning, child-centered teaching, brain-based theory, and all those fancy words that we often hear. Back then, it wasn't so common. I moved cities. I worked with international boards. I worked with many national boards. I set up many schools and led most of them. I believed I understood education. I believed I understood children, until I didn't. Life took a turn I never expected. After many years of working with premium schools, I found myself in a remote village in Nellore, Andhra Pradesh. A space that was absolutely unfamiliar in every sense. New land, a language that I did not speak or understand. A different reality altogether. Students whose lives looked nothing like the ones I had been engaging with and teaching for over 2 decades. The children did not arrive in fancy cars. Forget fancy cars. The parents of these children did not even have slippers to wear. Children we often describe as underprivileged. And very slowly, without realizing, another word creeps into our mind: less capable. The school that we started was part of a bold dream of the chairman of Vishwasamudra Group that I work for, Mr. Chinta Shashidhar. He wanted to create a school for the underprivileged boys that matched the standards of some of the most premium schools in the country. But the vision went beyond infrastructure. His belief was simple yet powerful. A humble school that may teach poor children to read and write, but his question was, can it make them believe that they belong to the world of leaders, of innovators, and decision makers? He wanted to change not just the academic outcome, but the mindset, to transform how these children saw themselves. He wanted every underprivileged child to believe, I'm worth it. I agreed to be part of the dream, even though I had absolutely no context or understanding of the underprivileged children at all, because I'd never worked with them, or the ground that I was working on. Somewhere deep within me, I also carried the same question that many of us do. Can these children really achieve the same levels of the kids that I had taught? I believed in my chairman, so I started the work. Then came the admissions day, what you see out there. Now, here's something important. The communities that we were teaching do not follow social media campaigns or glossy advertisement, newspaper cuttings. Now, the challenge was, how do you reach out to the parents? So we started entering into villages. We started getting in touch with the sarpanch. We started talking to parents and building trust. I also got some leads from some of my friends. And trust me, trust doesn't come easy. But what we were offering seemed to be too good to be true. But slowly the applications started rolling in, and after 4 months of rigorous work, we had roughly about 2,000 students who applied. And then we began interacting with these students. And what we saw left us stunned. Blank answer sheets, wrong answers. It confirmed every fear that I had thought of. Grade 5 students who couldn't write a single word. Children who did not even know a single-digit addition. And most of them spoke a language that none of us understood. And at that moment, every academic report that I had ever read came echoing back to me. Millions of children in school, but they are not learning. How would we bring them to the grade level? The fear was real. But the silver lining was that these students were curious about the new school. They were not anxious like the children that I had worked with. They were uninhibited, something that I was absolutely surprised to see. They knew that their parents did not have fancy cars, but they were not ashamed of that. They were being themselves because no one had spent years telling them that they needed to fit into the world's approval. And that became our starting point. We had to rethink how we would begin work with them. We had to change the way we had always been working. The pull had to start not from the textbook learning, but from what they did not have back home or in their earlier schools. So no rigid classrooms or sections, no rushing through textbooks. We grouped them as per their ability and not age. We focused on foundation, not speed. We replaced memorization with understanding. Learning had to start from relevant and contextual projects, which allowed students to speak, talk, and understand and question. We started working with bulls and cows, which we have on campus. Every child adopted a bull or a cow, and it became their pet. We started working around the farms that were there adjacent to the school. We started working on the families and the festivals that they celebrated and they understood. I witnessed the magic of place-based and project-based learning rolling out in front of me. Our libraries became the heart of the school. Stories became the bridges to language. Math became something that they could see, touch, and experience. Slowly, something remarkable began to happen. Children who once sat silently started asking questions. Children who were labeled weak started solving problems. Confidence replaced hesitation. Curiosity replaced fear. I was confused. What if that moment was not a proof of the child's inability? It was proof of something else. We began to question something deeper. We often believe that children from low-income backgrounds struggle because they lack motivation, they lack ability, or they lack the support from home. But what if this belief is completely wrong? What if the real challenge is not the child, but the conditions around the child? Hunger that distracts the mind, stress that overwhelms focus, systems that limit opportunity even before they begin. What we saw that these children were not engaged, their parents were not disinterested, and these children were definitely not incapable. They were navigating barriers that most of us never, ever have to face. Their parents cared, they cared deeply, and the potential that these kids had was real, immensely real. But the moment we look at them through a lens of deficit or a deficit lens, something dangerous happens. We lower our expectations. We limit the opportunities. And without even realizing it, we decide their future. And that is when the real injustice begins. So we change the question from, can these children learn, to what do they need to learn? And then the answers we felt were definitely not in the textbooks. They needed food before the formulas. They needed safety before syllabi, and dignity before discipline. They needed to trust us. And here is the truth we all must confront. Children from the privileged backgrounds do not succeed because they are more talented. They succeed because the system is designed for them. But when you provide the same system to these children, every child rises. Because the truth is simple. The moment we shift from the deficit mindset to a culture of possibilities, every child changes, every child rises. Give a moment and think, give a child nourishment, he will rise. Give them safety, give them belief. And you just don't improve learning. You unlock the potential that was always there. Not because they are different, but because they were never given a chance that they deserved, ever before. So the real question is not, are they capable? But the real question is, why did we ever believe that they were not? And the greatest divide in education, hence, it is not talent, it is definitely access. Access to a structured approach to learning, access to teachers who believe in their students, access to environments that help children believe that the child is worth it. Mere buildings do not transform the lives of children. Far too long, we have quietly accepted a very dangerous assumption that a child from a poor background somehow has less potential, or their struggle in school reflects low IQ, low ability, or low EQ. And that assumption collapses the moment the right conditions are created. I often hear people say that let's support gifted students from the underprivileged background. So are we assuming that every child or every student coming from not so privileged or not so underprivileged background is naturally gifted? The students have families to support. These students have parents to guide them, the basics of food, hygiene, and access to education, and yet we find unhappy students, and yet we do find failures in these privileged backgrounds as well. For the last 2 years, I've been working with the students from the families of the underprivileged, or what we call the below poverty line. As a residential school, the entire onus of taking the student forward is entirely on the faculty, on the teachers. Not just in the academic part, but also all the round development of the students that we often talk about, the holistic development. I can't even imagine that if these children are given this support, this learning, where they would land, because each day we find these children growing. And this is just a 1.5, 2-year-old story that I'm talking to you. These underprivileged students do not suffer from the curse of abundance of resources like mobile phones, social media frenzy, and the rural setup does not throw any contrast at them of a fancy residential building next to a slum. They adapt very fast because they maneuver the life and mostly all alone. Trust is high because they live in communities that support each other, not in condos, which live in silos. When children are taught through well-designed, structured learning, when concepts are broken down in simple ways that allows them to understand and build gradually, something remarkable happens. Confidence replaces hesitation. Curiosity replaces silence. And belief begins to grow. Because learning is not just about information or getting a job. Learning is about hope. When a child begins to believe, I can understand this. When a teacher consistently signals, I believe in you. When a school environment quietly reinforces, you belong here. And this is when the transformation begins. Children who were once labeled weak start asking questions. Students who were assumed to be incapable merely because they came from economically poor sections start solving problems. And slowly the narrative changes. Not because the child has changed, but definitely because the system around the child has finally started working for him or her. What we are witnessing at this school in Nellore is not a miracle, trust me. It's simple that when you put the structure or when the structure meets belief, and when this happens, something extraordinary becomes clear. Talent was always there, and it was just waiting for access. The greatest divide in education is not talent, hence it's definitely access. And access is something we have the power to change. Nandagokulam Life School at Nellore that I'm sharing the story of had the courage to change this narrative. And I will end my talk by just one little quote. It says, the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, but it is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. Thank you so much. Namaste.